Dwayne, are you ready to go?
Yeah, we're live right now.
Okay. A couple things, guys. I did get a request that we asked Dr. Milroy to reiterate what she was saying about daycares as that got cut off. So if she would do that, and then also we were in the middle of some comment that Brad Bees was reading, just not to have you forget your place. I don't know if that was lost when the stream was lost or not, but maybe we can check with him too, Mayor. Thank you.
Do we need to do roll call to see if everyone's here? Oh, Al is there. Hey, Al.
Again, you want a quick roll call?
Al, yeah, let's do roll call quick just to make sure everyone's here.
Okay, Benson.
Benson here.
Commissioner Benson is present. Sarda. Again, Sarda. Okay, we'll temporarily have Mr. Sarda as absent. Fertig.
Fertig's here.
Commissioner Fertig is here. Hoffner.
Hoffner present.
Commissioner Hoffner is here. Minor.
Minor present.
Commissioner Minor is here. Moser.
Moser here.
Commissioner Moser is here. Schramm.
Schramm present.
Commissioner Schramm is here. Weber.
Weber is here.
Commissioner Weber is here. I'll go back to Sarda. Okay, and for the people in the audience and Commissioner Sarda, if you come back on, just please announce that you're here. We'll put him down as absent for right now. And Mayor Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson is here. Point of clarification too, just to try and keep you informed. When you get to item 6, I do have a business owner and citizen Josh Blom out here that would like a comment or two, so keep that in mind as you're going through your discussion.
Okay, Dr. Miller, let's start with you. Reiterate what you were saying about daycare facilities.
While I was unable to find a very specific recommendation, as I looked at what under the CDC and other places were listing, other states and cities were listing, daycare centers seem to be listed under essential services. I think recognizing that people that need to continue to really have the function of your city go, which would be certainly your healthcare workers, your first responders, your certainly financial institutions, your groceries, your pharmacies, many institutions, they have to have childcare. So I think that has usually been classified in the essential services. And just kind of a side note to the CDC on their kind of their facts and figures kind of things have said that based on available evidence, children do not appear to be at higher risk for COVID-19 than adults. And that while there have been some children, this is kind of an unusual viral infection that it seems to be affecting children less than adults. And so I think generally the recommendation has been to keep daycare services in essential services and continue to let them operate. And I guess this is just an opinion. I did not see this anywhere like it from CDC, but in an exempt organization, I think it would fall in the same category as residential facilities, really, that we're already exempting from the 10-person rule. And so I would think it would fall into that category. Also looking on some of the CDC website and other places, there are very specific recommendations on hygiene and management of daycare facilities to keep them safe. And I certainly would say that we need to encourage the daycare facilities to do that, but I believe they've already been very active in doing such a thing to the extent that they can. So,
Dr. Milroy, can you, I don't know if you can clarify or not,
Now, when you say children are less susceptible, does that mean they're less susceptible to contract the disease or show symptoms?
I think actually both. The incidence in children seems to be less than it is in adults. In many viral infections, it seems to be, children that are very susceptible, and this one seems to be a little different for some unknown reason.
Thank you for that, Dr. Milroy. Brad, can we go back to you? We were kind of in the middle of some online questions and comments.
Yes, I've tried in the time we had to separate out what I think is Section 5 and Section 6 questions. I'm going to try to do just the Section 5 ones right now, and some folks listening may not hear their question because I think it relates more to retail businesses in the next section. There's a little crossover in these two sections, I think. We did lose a few of the comments when the stream went down, but they were all asking the question about daycare that I think Dr. Milroy addressed. Home daycares, and then a home daycare, S. Anderson asking, as a home daycare provider needs some guidance, we are struggling with not knowing what we should do. S. Maddie 21 asked the same question, as did Lisa E. This question goes back a little bit. Melissa Plath asks, if Governor Noem or the state considers a business essential, will you revise? Maybe that's a better Section 6 question. She also asks, vet care is essential over chiropractic care, to keep people healthy, and Kayla Kolda, related to daycare, says, all of us business owners will watch kids since we are out of business. And those are the comments I have from Section 5.
Thank you, Brad. Commissioners, any more discussion of Section 5? Otherwise, we will move on to Section 6. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. As a kind of a tidying up enforcement issue, all of paragraph 5 is intended to provide an exception specifically to the closures in paragraphs 1 through 4. And as a result, if you look in the first sentence of 5, it says the prohibitions and closures in this order do not apply to the following. To avoid confusion with the prohibitions included in paragraph 6, for purposes of proper interpretation of what paragraph 5 was intending to do, I think I need to strike the words prohibition and before the word closures. So I think the sentence should read, the closures in this order do not apply to the following. And then we would have A through G. That's just a little bit of housekeeping since we're finishing up with 5. I think that that's an appropriate change to make.
Sounds good to me. All right, moving on to... Yep.
Another thing I think that we'll do, because this is confusing as it is for all of us to go through this, it's even more confusing to be able to understand this. So once we've got your language put together, I think it would behoove us to have kind of a guide for businesses on what the ordinance covers and what it doesn't cover, and not written in a legal matter, but written in sort of a format that's easy to people to digest, that we can put on Facebook or on our social media so people can see, what is and what isn't included, because it's easy to get lost in this conversation, and I'm sure most people don't have the time to spend to be in this conversation with us. So I think that's important for us as well to do, to make it clear for people. So we're not, yes, we'll have the language there and people can read it, but I think having sort of a guide to the ordinance will be helpful for even for us.
And along those lines, Amy, as we get questions, is there going to be one number that we want people to call at the city for clarification, or how do you see that working?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And we will put that number as well as an email address of an individual staff person that can be contacted to address those things. So we're just not randomly getting texts, and we also don't want to answer somebody incorrectly, just in that we've gone back and forth a little bit. So then we can update language and update that if we need to update that as you continue to make your changes, if you need to make any more changes. But so we can try to answer them right now, but until you guys vote, there's nothing included in the ordinance. So that might be helpful for folks to know that, we'll get it all out there. It might not be, I don't know what time we're going to be finishing, but it might not be today, because we'll need Ross to work on the language, get it back to us, and then we'll get something out there so people have a good understanding of everything that's applicable.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Mosier. Thank you, Amy, because I think we all, 9 of us, are going to be getting a lot of questions, and to have a central email, phone number, location that we can refer people to. I do know that means our city employees are going to have to take on some additional duties until all questions are answered. But I do think that takes all of the pressure off us to have to answer those as well, just in case we don't understand it correctly.
Yeah, I think it probably takes pressure off city employees too, as we all give them the wrong answers. Our city employees can make sure they're getting the same answers.
We haven't even talked about enforcement yet, and I don't really want to talk to enforcement today if we don't need to. But we also want to have that, I'm calling it a primer, but that document available for our law enforcement people who are going to get, a lot of the calls when maybe the regular business hours aren't happening, or might have to address that. So they're clear on what they need to do, and they have a set of guidelines, and they know what's included and what isn't. So that's in the plans. I'm just waiting to see what you guys end up with first.
All right, so Section 6, Ross, can you summarize for us what Section 6 addresses?
Yes.
Nathan, if you don't mind, real quick, can we go back to 5 just to clarify as far as whether daycare is going to be required to follow the 10 person rule as stated in the ordinance?
So, Ross, you need to turn on your mic.
Thank you, Mayor. Point of clarification on that. Paragraph 5 is very clear exceptions, to the extent that there's any confusion, to the obligation to close businesses. So, the conversation kind of meandered into exceptions to paragraph 6 earlier in the last hour. I have, depending upon what the commission would like, I can certainly add an exception to paragraph 5 that makes it clear that daycare providers don't need to close. But if they are not going to be subject to the 10-day requirement, that exemption should be included under paragraph 6B as one of the enumerated exceptions from the 10-person rule.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Is everyone okay with Ross doing that, or do we need to vote on it? If I don't hear anything, I will assume it's okay. All right, so Ross, can you again, and thank you for that clarification, Chris. Ross, can you summarize Section 6 for us, please? But you'll have to turn on your mic to do it.
Turn your mic on.
I'm really sorry. All right, so give me a moment. I'm adding to paragraph 5 an exemption for daycare providers. So that will be paragraph G, and the old paragraph G will be moved down and will become H. Okay, paragraph 6 makes it unlawful in the city of Yankton for any person to participate in a, quote, communal gathering, end quote, as defined herein, effective through Tuesday, Tuesday, April 28, 2020, or until such extended time as may be recommended by the Board of Health and approved by resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners, not to exceed the time frame in which this ordinance remains in effect, which prohibition shall be governed by the following terms. There's a definition of communal gathering, which is any indoor or outdoor gathering of people, subject to the exceptions and clarifications below, that brings together or is likely to bring more than 10 persons at the same time in a single room or other single confined or enclosed space, including but not limited to an office space or similar confined place of employment, a single family residence, or a residential apartment unit. For purposes of this ordinance, a communal gathering does not include larger gatherings in the following locations, so long as people take care not to be within arm's length of one another for extended periods. As follows: public parks, sidewalks, streets, and the outdoor portions of any golf course, parking lots and common areas of any hotel, office building, or residential apartment building, grocery stores, shopping malls, manufacturing facilities, or other retail or business establishments where larger numbers of people may be present, but where it is unusual for people to be within arm's length of one another for extended periods, hospitals, mental health or substance abuse treatment facilities, and medical clinics and facilities, and any other location established by recommendation of the City Health Board and approved by resolution of the Yankton Board of City Commissioners. The first question I have for the commission to guide this discussion is, do you want the time frame to line up with the May 1st time frame that we added to paragraphs 1 through 4?
I would say yes.
But he disagree with that.
No, but I do have clarification on two things. One, on B1, I don't know how that is, where it says public parks, sidewalks, streets, and outdoor portions. Do we need to include any outdoor recreation areas as we defined in the section above? And then I did get a text for clarification. We talked about Mount Marty earlier in this meeting. With the students that they have on campus, they only have set eating hours. Are you telling them that they can only have 10 students eating lunch at the same time? Or if they can spread them out and social distance them, they're okay to have all, let's say, 40 people eat at the same time as long as they are socially distanced?
The ordinance as written restricts the defined term communal gatherings, which requires a confined or enclosed space. So if they're spread out or they're given their food to go, which is what I'd recommend, that would not violate the rule. Even if people may need to stand in line to collect their food, I think they should move to different rooms or move far enough apart that I think we'd all agree that they're not gathering.
Ross, the one piece I would like to see changed where we say arm's length from each other. Can we make that consistent with the guidelines we're seeing with saying 6 feet apart from one another? Does anyone have any problems with that? Commission, any more feedback from you? All right, then we'll go to Al. Is there anyone in the meeting room who would like to address the commission about something in section 6?
Yes, and he's turning on his mic and he'll speak.
Okay, I would just like to have under.
Excuse me, Josh, introduce yourself.
With Walnut Village. Thanks for having me, Commission. I would just like to have under the section 6, part B, part 4, if long-term care facilities could be added as an exception. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it might have been just me. Can somebody reiterate what he just said?
He was asking that we add long-term care facilities to section 4, B4, which I think makes sense. It falls in line with the other things listed there. Does anyone have any issues with that? That was Josh, right? I think I heard that right. Thank you for that.
And assisted living facilities.
Yep, that would be good to have too. Anyone else in the meeting room, Al?
No, not at this time.
Okay. What about YouTube comments? What are we hearing there, Brad?
Yes, there are quite a few. I'm going to try to pause to let you answer or redirect if you'd like. I
think to streamline this, I'm going to have Amy provide the answers to Amy or Rob.
Kurt Bernard asks, so First National Call Center and factories must close, ?
No.
Bruce Dutrow asks, if retail business does not have 10 people in their establishment, then that business is okay to function. That is my understanding.
Correct.
Garrick Tracy says, protect our community, ? How when testing is ineffective and they sit for days? Anthony,
testing is ineffective and it sits for days, Brad?
I think that's a general question about
that's a criticism of where testing is at.
That doesn't pertain to our ordinance. However, thank you for that input. As we visit with state officials, we'll pass that concern along.
Anthony Osborne asks, how are these people going to afford rent, bills? Is this being addressed? If they're going to tell people they can't work, how are they protecting people with rent and mortgages that live paycheck to paycheck?
That's a huge concern, both for the city commission and for staff. In talking about this, we realize that effectively there will be many people financially impacted on this ordinance. There is a community relief fund being discussed through United Way. I don't have the details on that. I expect and anticipate there'll be some assistance perhaps through the Small Business Administration for small businesses and other packages that come forward from the federal government. I don't know that they'll be available for individual families and individual family assistance. So I don't have that information, but I know that's something that's weighing on the commissioners' minds.
Kurt Bernard asks, will you help in keeping small businesses afloat by refunding sales tax and property taxes year to date?
Those will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. It's too early to say that at this time.
Amy Bailey comments, this is intense, challenging, and complicated, and just wanted to say thank you for the great job you are doing. Thank you for your hard work in figuring out all of this for the community. Cassie Pites offers a thank you as well. These two questions are related. Terry Eichelberg and Andrew Van Dosselaar asks, are car dealerships expected to close? Is car buying essential? Is getting a car fixed essential?
I'm going to say that car dealerships are not expected to close. You're going to look at a car usually on your own. You might interact with a salesperson. You can stand away from them. So I'm going to say no on that. And then the car fixing, you need your car fixed to get to work. I know that I've talked to someone who's been at a local repair shop. They drove in, the waiting room was already set up for them, so not to sit near. And I'm going to say no, the car fixing, car maintenance is okay.
Shelly Sangster asks, are dog grooming shops going to be part of this? I am the only person in my shop all day long. I know we addressed that. I just wanted to be in fairness say that these were the comments that came in.
Yes,
also,
and I believe where you landed on. I believe where you landed on that, Commission, was that you were okay with that. Is that correct? I have to go back in my notes.
If I could interrupt, one of the
believe that-
amendments, again, I'll pause for just a second, but one of the amendments, Amendment 2, added dog grooming, tattoos, and tanning to those that are, I forget how it's worded, it's, hang on just a sec. That's added to Section 2, which they're required to close.
Okay, pardon me, the dog grooming is asked to close under this ordinance. I was thinking, I think of the veterinarian services, which are permitted. So pardon me to the YouTuber that I answered that incorrectly at first.
There's another question that I think is similar. It said, I missed the first section, but will hair salons be allowed to be open? The next question is
Brad, I didn't hear the question.
The question was, the person says, I missed the first sections, but will hair salons be allowed to open?
With the current amendments that you put in, I understand that you have asked hair salons not to be open. So that would have to be,
Sorry. Jessica Cameron asks, what about factories eating lunch together? They might be social distances while working, but not eating.
Factories are remaining open.
Lee Anderson. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
They would need to adhere to the 10 people rule.
They need to, separate themselves and things like that.
Lee Anderson asks, regarding 6A, what is the definition of a confined space of employment? Similarly, what is the definition of extended periods?
And so I don't believe we have definitions written in those. I think we would ask that folks use reasonable judgment on that. We can't obviously define every element in every ordinance. A confined space, if you're, typically work, in a small office where you're shoulder to shoulder with somebody, that could be considered a confined space. But, if you're able to separate from one another, that would then take away that confinement. We're talking about reasonability here. We have to use some language to describe these things. And I don't want people to think that we're going to be sending city staff into businesses, into factories, and sticking their nose in and, with a measuring tape or anything like that. We're developing a guideline for best practices here, so people that do remain open can find ways to make their operations work.
And the last question I see is from Deb Palmer, who asks, since business closures are coming from our city and not at the state level, will businesses get a prorated reimbursement during the mandated closure for the required yearly business licenses?
That hasn't been discussed. That's something that we can discuss later on at the commission's request, or, it might be something that we come up with on our own. Perhaps those things haven't been discussed, although we have had some internal discussions with staff about the various things that we do with businesses and licensees holders also memberships for different facilities. We're talking about those things. It's early yet, but that's a valuable suggestion.
That is the last question I see.
Thank you.
All right. Any more commission discussion? Otherwise, we'll move on to section 8 where we talk about the penalties. Or excuse me, no, we're not even to that. Ross, why don't you summarize section 8 unless someone has some questions? Go ahead.
Section 8 is the provision of the ordinance that provides what I'll refer to as the sunset. All of the regulation that we have covered today ends no matter what on Tuesday, June 8th. However, within the period of time from now until June 8th, pretty much everything that's being regulated can be extended out to that date. So all of the regulation that we are imposing today currently only is cast out until May 1st. If the commission deems that it is appropriate for these regulations to continue beyond May 1st, by resolution, this board may extend the deadlines, but it cannot extend those deadlines or the end date of the regulation beyond June 8th without passing a new ordinance.
Any questions about that?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Mosier, just for a minor point of clarification. Did I miss 7 somewhere, or should that actually be bullet 7? I see we go from 6 to 8.
And again, I think that's important that the audience hears this too. This was drafted rapidly this morning. I don't believe there's a section 7 right now. If you're watching online, section 8 eventually will be section 7, but we didn't skip a section for those listening in. We went from 6 to 8 merely because the presented one is numbered that way. We'll correct that as we finish, but again, the viewing audience, we didn't skip a section. There was no 7.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, there used to be a 7, but the health board opted to move away from that. They removed a regulation and we did not correct the numbering. That was a typographical formatting error.
All right, any further discussion of what is currently section 8 but will be section 7? Okay, then we will move on to what is now section 9 but will be section 8. And that gets to the penalties. So Ross, summarize that for us, please.
All right, under section 9, which will be section 8, any person that is found to be in violation of this ordinance will be guilty of a class 2 misdemeanor, which is the strongest form of penalty that a municipal ordinance can have. It is punishable by a fine of up to $500 or up to 30 days in jail at the discretion of the court.
I would like to have a little bit of discussion here. Is Chief Harris still in the room?
Yes, he's approaching the mic.
Oh, sorry, this is Commissioner Mosier. Just out of curiosity, maybe it's premature, but have you begun to have discussions on how your staff will enforce this and what this might mean to your workload?
This is Chief Harris, and one of the things that we have discussed, Commissioner, is that we are going to start out with education and then warnings, and then at the last resort do violations, and even those won't be direct. I mean, we're going to take a very, very easy approach to this to start out to get people to comply through, compliance.
Yep, I think that's an excellent approach, Chief Harris. And Commander Foote last night during our health board discussion, that was part of it as well, is the enforcement aspect. And he thought that, we have a lot of very responsible, good citizens that are business owners. He hopes that there is not a lot of enforcement action needed, just because people want to be good citizens. And we believe there will be peer pressure to comply with this as well. So we hope that takes care of a lot of the enforcement issues.
I feel the same way.
With the police department this morning regarding the need to approach this from an educational standpoint, as we do all of our ordinances initially. We work towards education and understanding, and not towards, gotcha moments or anything like that. It's not what this is about at all.
This is Commissioner Mosier. I appreciate that, Amy and Chief Harris. This is going to be a big change for everybody, and I really do truly appreciate it, taking it from an education standpoint. We're all going to need that.
All right, commissioners, there is a motion and a second to approve the ordinance. Do we have any further discussion amongst commissioners before we proceed with roll call?
Excuse me. This is Commissioner Schramm. Prior to approving this ordinance, I think it may be prudent to have a discussion on understanding that the financial hardships that this is going to cause, and we are aware of that, fully aware of that, and want to do our part, knowing that we are enacting these. Discussion of the City Commissioners on should we suspend our pay that we receive from the city and put that towards some form of relief, whatever that may be, for the time that this ordinance is in place. That's an idea just up for discussion and what the other commissioners think, but we can make an amendment to this ordinance that would put that in place, I believe.
Or if it pleases the commission, I can put that on your agenda for Monday evening. There is a relief fund through, I believe, United Way is working on that at this time. So I could put that on the agenda. That would give us a little more time to make some suggestions to you all and for you all to talk individually amongst yourself about what the right thing to do is.
I would personally absolutely support that.
I would be fine proposing moving it to that date, Amy. This again is just an idea that we could put into play.
This is Commissioner Mosier. I am certainly not opposed to it. I just think we want to put together a more comprehensive plan as all of our options. And so I was actually going to ask that we put something like that on the agenda for the next meeting as well.
Okay.
I will do it.
Any more commission discussion about the ordinance?
Mayor Johnson, Commissioner Mosier, just a point of clarification. Does the motion in second do approval as amended? I know we did all of those various amendments. The original motion was to approve the resolution. I don't believe the words as amended were in there.
Ross, do we need to clarify that, or is it okay to proceed as we are?
As long as everybody understands that you guys would be voting on the amended version that we worked through this afternoon, then we're okay. I would assume that that would be how Al reflects it in the minutes also.
Correct.
Okay, last call for feedback from the commissioners. Al, is there anyone in the meeting room that would like to address the commission?
There's nobody in the meeting room.
All right. Brad, anyone on YouTube?
Yes, there are a couple of questions. Shelly Sangster asks, what time is the closing on Thursday?
It's before any of us wake up in the morning. It's midnight.
So technically Friday night or Thursday night, it would go into effect at midnight.
The last question I see here is from Patriot Express, who says, casinos are deemed non-essential currently. I would like to point out that the SBA does have limitations on a small business getting loans when that business's income is gambling. And that is the last question I see here.
Thank you for that. All right, Al, let's do roll call.
Okay, and then again to review, you're voting on the original motion as amended.
I couldn't hear that question.
The very last question or the last two?
Amy, I don't think you need to answer
I did
that.
not hear the
So
last question if you're looking for an answer there.
I don't think we need an answer to that.
Okay, pardon me.
It's out of our powers. So Al, proceed, please.
Again, clarify, we're voting on the original amendment, or I'm sorry, the original motion as amended by amendments 1, 2, and 3. And now we'll begin roll call. Hoffner.
Hoffner says aye.
Commissioner Hoffner votes aye. Minor.
Minor votes aye.
Commissioner Minor votes aye. Moser.
Mosier, aye.
Commissioner Moser votes aye. Schramm.
Schramm, aye.
Commissioner Schramm votes aye. Excuse me. Weber.
Commissioner Weber votes aye.
Commissioner Weber votes aye. Benson.
Benson votes aye.
Benson votes aye. Commissioner Sarda, are you there?
Sarda votes aye.
Commissioner Sarda votes aye. Fertig, are you there?
Fertig, aye.
Commissioner Fertig votes aye. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson votes aye.
Mayor Johnson votes aye. The motion, or the ordinance as amended, passes 9-0.
Thank you, everyone. I know that was a long, tough discussion, but appreciate you hanging in there. None of us ran on platforms of hurting businesses in our community, so this is really going against everything we hope to accomplish as leaders in our community. Hopefully, in a few months, we can focus again on economic growth rather than the public health aspect, which is taking priority at this time. With that, we do have a second item on our agenda regarding the April municipal election. Ross, did you want to give us some background on what's being proposed there?
Sure. As it stands right now, the municipal election is scheduled, as is typically, for the second Tuesday in the month of April. That's the 14th of April. Al, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe absentee voting begins already this coming Monday. In light of the fact that we're passing an ordinance that encourages people not to gather and effectively shutting down businesses because they are gathering places, it seems awfully hypocritical that the city would be encouraging everybody to come down and turn in absentee ballots and or line up to vote on April 14th in the midst of this crisis. So one thing the law does allow a municipality to do is piggyback the municipal election on top of the June primary that's held by the county. The city has the obligation to obtain the consent of the county and has the obligation to share the cost of that election. But given the time frame and the emergent situation we're all facing, it just seems appropriate that this commission approve pushing that election off until June. The resolution authorizes this action contingent upon approval by the county and obligates the city to pay its statutorily required share of the cost of that election in cooperation with the county. With respect to the commissioners whose terms would be coming up, under state law, those commissioners would continue in their seats until the election is actually held and the newly elected commissioners, whoever they may be, are officially sworn in. So there would not be a donut hole of sorts where we have 3 empty seats. If an outgoing commissioner wished to, now this isn't in the resolution, but just so you know where the law sits on this, if any of you whose term is coming up wishes to resign, you are still free to do that, and the remaining seated commissioners could fill that spot by appointment until the election and the new commissioners are sworn in.
When would the new commissioners be sworn in, Ross? Do you know?
It would be the first commission meeting following the canvass of that election. Typically, correct me if I'm wrong, Al or Amy, but I believe that's typically the new business portion of the first meeting in May. Does that typically sound right?
It would like, if we were to go with this calendar, it would likely be the first meeting in July, which would be your reorganization meeting then, which would be July the 13th.
Yep. So
also, this is contingent upon.
And I'll just add that I had a conversation with Commission Chairman Sherry Lose today, and she said she would at least be agreeable to us having a joint election with them. As we said previously, I doubt they would have any reason why they wouldn't be okay with that as a group.
This is contingent upon the county agreeing to that. If you approve this, staff would then go to the county and have them take formal action.
Do we have a motion on this item?
This is Commissioner Schramm. So moved.
Commissioner Minor, second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion? Al, is there anyone in the meeting room who would like to address the commission on this item?
There's nobody present at the meeting room.
Thank you. Brad, anyone on YouTube who wishes to address the commission?
There's no one on YouTube asking a question or commenting about this item.
Okay, thank you. Al, let's do roll call.
Okay, again, for the listening audience, what we're voting on is a resolution that will postpone the municipal election until the first Tuesday in June, coinciding with the county election / primary. And again, we'll go to roll call. Minor.
Minor, aye.
Commissioner Minor votes aye. Moser.
Moser will abstain since I'm an incumbent in this election.
Commissioner Moser abstains. Schramm.
Aye.
Commissioner Schramm votes aye. Weber.
Weber votes aye.
Commissioner Weber votes aye. Benson.
Benson, aye.
Commissioner Benson votes aye. Sarda.
Sarda, aye.
Commissioner Sarda votes aye. Fertig.
Fertig, aye.
Commissioner Fertig votes aye. Hoffner.
Hoffner, aye.
Commissioner Hoffner votes aye. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson votes aye.
Mayor Johnson votes aye. The resolution passes 8-0 with one abstention.
Not sure Jake wants to spend a couple more months with us. All right.
Before you folks adjourn, let me just package a little bit some of these things up for the public's benefit. So we've made a lot of changes to the ordinance today. Ross will be working on crafting that language. As soon as he has that language crafted, we'll put that out on social media and get that to you as well, so you have the revised language. Your second reading on this will be on Monday, although we are enacting it on the 27th. Excuse me, on the 26th, midnight. If you make any substantial changes on Monday, and I'm not talking about typos or, a spelling error or something like that, but any substantial changes require yet another reading. So that's why we spent the time we did today hashing through everything. So just so you're aware of that. We will also then start putting together that guide for understanding enforcement, as well as a guide for understanding the ordinance. We won't have that tonight. Many of us are, we need a little bit of rest so we can focus and do a good job here on things. So that probably won't come tonight. We ask people to be patient with that. But we'll start working on those types of things together. We do have a health board meeting tomorrow scheduled for, I believe, 4 o'clock. So we're just going to recap. There's no pending items that we think we need to bring forward to you, but we'll have that meeting. And if there are, we'll put those on that agenda for next Monday. However, at this time, I think we'll sort of just recap and revisit about what the situation is local in our community. In terms of your resolution, we will go into the county and request that they let us combine and cost share that election. We'll contact the Secretary of State's office, and we'll also notify the South Dakota Municipal League, because those other cities are interested in how we've done this as well. So that's where we're proceeding and how we're moving forward. I just thought it'd be nice to kind of have everyone understand, because I feel like, we're going to probably get bombarded this afternoon on social media about what's open, what's closed, what's open, what's not. And we will answer those, we'll get to those, but we might not be have a quickest turnaround as because we want to make sure we have our language in hand before we start doing that. That's all.
This is Commissioner Mosier. In fairness to the other 4 candidates on the ticket, will you also be contacting them if they were not able to be on this meeting?
Thank you. I'll ask Al and Lisa to get a hold of them. We did not contact them prior. However, I'm sure they'll be understanding, and we'll work with them on, making sure that everything with all the candidates is still legal, that they don't have to refile. We'll work with all them on those things.
Also, with sign ordinance, are we going to waive that for political signs that are currently out that will now be in non-compliant?
Yes, I will. Thank you for mentioning that. I will work with community development. We've got a lot of other concerns that don't have anything to do with sign compliance, of course, but what we can do is reopen that window. And if we get further down in the weeks here and we decide, yeah, we want to, we'll work with them. We're not going to start, we won't start, down our sign ordinance with them. We'll work with all that.
So we are actually in the window right now for June 8th by days.
Well, there you go. So everyone's compliant.
All right. Thank you to our staff who have to work diligently here in the next day or two, answering a lot of questions. The one thing I would add as far as the community situation, Governor Noem did say today that if they see evidence of community spread, they will give local officials a call to let us know as soon as they are aware of that. So that might be reassuring to us who are wondering what the status is in our community. With that, there's no other business on today's agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'm sorry, can I say one thing?
Yes.
Before we adjourn? You guys, I'm just looking at all of our little pictures on this and seeing the weight of it. And I personally just want to thank each of you. Balancing the head and the heart here is such a challenge, and I appreciate that we're all in it together. Thank you.
That's a good note to end on. Thank you, Amy. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Whoever moves.
Benson, so moved.
Do we have a motion and a second?
If I could, you're tying and it's really coming in garbled. Would you please go through that one more time, a motion and a second?
Jerry, we'll say Jerry Weber had the first motion, the original motion, and Commissioner Benson had the second. And then Al, if you can follow up with roll call, please.
Okay, and the motion is to adjourn the meeting. We'll go to roll call. Mosier.
Mosier, aye.
Mosier's aye. Schramm.
Schramm, aye.
Commissioner Schramm is aye. Weber.
Weber's aye.
Commissioner Weber is aye. Benson.
Benson, aye.
Commissioner Benson is aye. Sarda.
Sarda, aye.
Commissioner Sarda is aye. Fertig.
Fertig, aye.
Commissioner Fertig is aye. Hoffner.
Hoffner, aye.
Commissioner Hoffner is aye. Minor.
Minor, aye.
Commissioner Minor is aye. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson votes aye.
Mayor Johnson votes aye. The motion passes 9-0.
All right, that concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, you going to stick around and answer some questions?
Sure.
That'd be nice.
Amy, are you still on?
Yes.
Okay. Jerry, go ahead.
And fascinating, by the way. So, can you, in a nutshell, tell us what the ordinance you passed entails?
Ross, why don't I throw that one to you?
All right, so this ordinance does effectively two things. It identifies 4 separate scheduled lists of businesses that are highlights a set of businesses that are required to close based on the nature of the businesses being public gathering locations or businesses that have very close contact between the business owner and the public. The second portion of this ordinance restricts groups of more than 10 people within the community. People need to spread out and observe the limit between them. We have gatherings that are larger than 10 people that are closely combined. It can result in a citation. We want people to spread out to their own safety.
Jerry, are you able to hear that all right? The audio's pretty bad.
Yeah, that was pretty.
We've got
Yeah,
several
that's pretty
folks
bad.
with mics open.
Sorry.
Do we need to have people mute their microphones, maybe? I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, you sound good. Whatever Ross is using sounds pretty grimy.
You want me to take off my camera?
No, now you sound better now.
Okay. I can repeat what I said.
Okay, if you don't mind.
No problem. The ordinance effectively does two things. The first part of the ordinance carves out groupings of businesses that are required to close based on the nature of those businesses as being natural gathering places, encourage social gatherings, or the nature of the business is such that people have to very close together or touch each other. The second portion of the ordinance requires that the public limit their gatherings to less than 10 people. It is a violation of the ordinance to have more than 10 people gathered in one location in a confined space or area. It's of course designed to encourage social distancing for the protection of the public.
Yeah, Ross, your audio.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Why don't we give the media our telephone numbers? They can call us.
That sounds good.
Well, Nathan, I can hear you pretty good.
Ross?
So.
Yeah, Amy, we can hear you pretty good too. So if you could stay on.
Okay.
Yeah, in an overall sense, obviously it was difficult to do, and why take this kind of step?
We've gotten mixed feedback on that. Some have really pushed as to why we haven't already taken action. Others are pushing back on why we need to take action. But I would say in the people have contacted me, the vast majority of them think we do need to take steps like this to address this pandemic. In South Dakota, we've had more time to prepare than people on the coast. If we look at Seattle, New York, California, they've been getting hit hard already. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to use that time wisely and prepare for what we know is coming. There seems to be some people who think that because we're in South Dakota, this isn't going to hit us like it hits the coast, that we're somehow going to be exempt from it. And we've seen absolutely no evidence that the virus is making exceptions for rural states. So now's the time that we have to take the steps we can to mitigate the spread. And what does that mean? That means social distancing, keeping 6 feet apart, not going to the grocery store every day. Try to make one trip a week if you can. Limiting your outings, your social outings. And today our ordinance addressed a lot of that. It mandates the closure of a lot of businesses that people gather at for recreational purposes. It also mandates that people should not be meeting in groups of 10 or more, which is in alignment with CDC recommendations.
As you went through the ordinance, there was amendments and a lot of discussion, picking and choosing. How do you tell a business that the decision made was fair when you pick one over the other, for instance?
I've been watching a lot of watching and listening to and reading a lot of healthcare experts, a lot of emergency management experts, people who have dealt with disease outbreaks in other parts of the world. And their message is pretty clear. You need to take action because the virus that you're fighting does not wait for you to hedge through all the details and make everything perfect. So you got every T crossed when it gets here. And that's where we're at now. I think a lot of us thought that the governor would be the one that takes an action like this based on what we've seen in other parts of the country. However, we were told late last week that she would not be doing that. And so very quickly, we tried to gather our resources to figure out what we can do at the local level to stop this. And so that's meant within a matter of days, we've had to put together an ordinance that is really against everything we try to do as local leaders. We're trying to grow the economy. We're trying to help businesses get started and grow. And here we're telling them, you have to shut down. And that's where the priority of public health comes into play. In my mind, the public health in this case outweighs economic concerns. I think you can say we're fortunate or unfortunate in that the entire nation and a lot of the globe is facing an economic crisis as a result of COVID-19. So hopefully that means once we're through the worst of this, there's a desire for all of us to get help, the help that we need. I think we get very focused on